welcome back. It's been about 4 months for me, actually, since I've completed this playthrough. But we're gonna do a post-game chat now. I actually did have one fully edited and encoded and good to go. I just never got around to uploading it for whatever reason. But I'm actually glad it never got uploaded because I spent far too much time talking about Mass Effect 3 and Clive Barker's other game called Jericho. But it's been a really busy semester for coursework for me. I ended up I made a paper about the methods of diplomacy of the Hittites, and it was actually a lot of fun, but it was very intensive. And I realize it sounds crazy, like that subject matter and having fun. To those who don't study history or think it's boring, I probably sound like a madman. But for those who like studying the human condition and I guess humanities in general, it was fairly interesting. Anyway, so back to Clive Barker's Undying. Well, part of the reason I made this playthrough is because for all the times I recommended this game to other people, like they couldn't get into it. This game is it's now old enough that there are aspects that definitely don't help it, but it's new enough to still be a modern game. I mean, if you were to recommend someone play Wolfenstein 3D, you know, one of the very first-person shooters, I mean, they could sit down and fiddle with it for 5 minutes, and they could call it good and leave it at that, and be like, "Oh man, that was really old. That was very interesting. I can't believe games were like this back in the day," so on and so forth. Because in that 5 minutes of gameplay, you're gonna get the whole experience. I mean, in those days, a story only had to be like a couple pages long or just a paragraph long, and that was good enough. That was all the expectations. Well, as games became more advanced, both technologically and in terms of storyline, there needed to be more interaction. And Undying in the early 2000s sits at the precipice of it sits at a number of crossroads, and it does have some downfalls, and I wanted to talk about some of those downfalls. So first off, there were two dynamics to the game that really kind of hindered the immersion of the experience, or just, you know, I don't need to add a bunch of words. It hindered the gameplay experience. Excuse me. The first is this weird mechanic that is kind of a layover from Quake, where to interact with the environment, you had to just run into it. That's great for buttons and levers, but there are certain other parts to this game, like notably, like when you take your first little jaunt in Oneros, and you have to open and jump down into a sarcophagus to get further in the level. You just have to haplessly or unwittingly run into the sarcophagus to open it up, and then you realize, oh, I can jump down in there, and that's how it happens. No one needs to spend 20 minutes or 2 hours of their time trying to figure out a simple little puzzle, I dare say, like that, just simply because a feature or a way of interaction is unintuitive. A lot of people complain about consolitis in this day and age, and I don't blame them. I mean, when you dumb down a game to the point that it's a detriment, that's definitely bad. But on the flip side, you need to have a degree of, I'm going to use the word of being ergonomic. It has to be at least somewhat intuitive. You can't just throw someone in a situation and expect them to be able to understand everything on their own. You kind of need a guiding hand. After all, the game is about entertainment, not making you want to pull out your hair and yell at inanimate objects over some silly thing. Anyway, so moving on. that sort of weird way of interacting with the environment, it 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 can be a killer. It's bad, and I'm kind of glad that's went away. So secondly, as opposed to interacting with the environment, there's this aspect of interacting with the storyline. And what I mean by that is there are some weird ways of how they went about going through the levels. I'm still speaking very broad, vague terms, but specifically I'm talking about this aspect of key fetching. Now, the game did a pretty good job at integrating that because you need Bethany's room key to unlock Bethany's room. Seems to make sense. But if you guys remember when we had to get the Scythe of the Celt, we had to get the tower key and the sun chest key and also the trapdoor key and like 50 billion other keys, just to kind of get through the level and get through the storyline. And secondly, it was you're doing this all on some like weird vague mention in your journal about like this powerful artifact that may or may not have been destroyed in the past. So suddenly you're on this quest to find your way to time travel. It made for an awesome experience. I mean, going back in time, fetching the scythe, and it was a very interesting concept. But the lead up through that, I mean, all this started by just, hey, I better inspect the family mausoleum. Okay. Talk about a digression. So yeah, that was definitely weird. And yeah, we have to cut the game a break because we know that there are parts of the game that are cut out. They either ran out of time or EA was just like, okay, sorry, whatever, just push it out. And yeah, that too was it's kind of a hurdle to jump over. So that said, though, the biggest weak point about the game is definitely the ending. What can I say? I mean, when you figure out how to defeat the end boss, and then you do defeat him, like as soon as you do, bam, you get the outro, which brings a lot more questions and answers. And being humans, we like to have a sense of completion. We'd like to have a conclusion. We'd like to have all of our little loose ends tied up. And the ending we were presented with had none of that. It just brought more questions. And if we had a sequel, that would have been great. But we didn't. So instead we have this. And it was just not good. But on the flip side, the game overall has actually aged fairly well. I mean, yeah, the graphics take some getting used to. Is it the worst thing in the world? Is it Wolfenstein 3D? No. But it doesn't take too long to adjust. I mean, there are some other games that, oh dear lord, they look bad. But never mind that. Again, this is Clive Undying. But the game has aged well because, I mean, you had some of these very fairly modern features, like the whole radio manual system. The inventory system here was definitely kind of clunky. It definitely could have been better. I think that definitely scared a lot of people off. It's why actually, for people actually brave enough and go, I'm gonna play through this, I go play on easy. Because on easy mode, when you get hurt enough, it will automatically use up one of your med kits. And that alone is very helpful. Oh my god. But then of course, I mean, the obvious thing to talk about is just that the story and just the experience of the game was overall very good, very well put together. I haven't quite had an experience like that at all. I mean, I'm not the most experienced gamer. I'm not one of those people who spends a lot of money every month or even every year buying a bunch of games. My Steam library list is actually pretty small. but I look for games that I feel are quality games. I like I don't like games that are just time sinks. Counter-Strike is fun, but after about an hour, I go, okay, I need to stop, and I leave it alone for a couple months before I venture into another gaming session of that, because that's just not me. I like to be entertained. I like an experience, and this definitely is one of those games. Probably my next playthrough actually is gonna be probably Metro 2033, the redo edition, because that is probably one of the best shooters that's been created lately. It's very atmospheric. It has a nice storyline. I mean, it's basic, but again, the experience of it is very good. And of course, it's graphically it's great. This looks pretty paltry in comparison. Nothing else really needs to be said on that matter. But anyway, yeah, this has been Clive Burkers Undying. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this playthrough. It's for the people who have been interested in the game, but when they tried it, or they just couldn't bring themselves to do it because it is old. It's going on 15 years. This is for you. Because also I didn't want to blind playthroughs. I mean, they're fun, but sometimes you want to know more about the game. So I tried to have it be informative. Maybe I babbled on a little bit too much. Either way, I mean, everyone has their own style, so whatever. Anyway, that's it. Clive Barker's Jericho. See you guys later.